80 years ago today, November 27th, 1940, at 7:12 a.m., a legend was born. You might have heard of him, Bruce Lee. So who was Bruce Lee? Martial artist, philosopher, dance champion. That's right. Humanitarian, eternal student, actor, Hong Kong and American actor, movie director, producer, and screenwriter. The founder of Jeet Kune Do, translated from Cantonese, means the way of the intercepting of the fist. Husband, father to 2 children, Brandon and Shannon Lee. I want to share in this video the highlights and turning points in the history of his life, and I would also like to share a little bit of this book called Be Water, My Friend, The Teachings of Bruce Lee, recently released and written by his daughter Shannon Lee, and some of his philosophies in it. If you are a Bruce Lee fan, or you don't even have to know anything about martial arts, or you can be literally anyone and you will get a lot out of this book. It's beautiful. I also want to mention a little bit into his astrology later, as well as how I personally got inspired to really investigate into who he really was as a legend. To keep his legacy alive, in the closing of this video, I will mention one way that you can help to do that. Bruce Jun Fan Lee, Lee Su Long, which Su Long means little dragon, was born in San Francisco, California, while his parents were in the midst of a Chinese opera world tour. Ultimately raised in Hong Kong, Bruce was a child actor and appeared in more than 20 films by the age of 18. In his childhood, he also studied dance. He was a bit rebellious, which led him into street fights, and he himself admitted in an interview that he had a bad temper, a violent temper, in fact. From these street fights, he began to study combat, and at the age of 13, he took up the study of Wing Chun Kung Fu under renowned legendary martial artist Wing Chun Kung Fu master Yip Min. Bruce was a very diligent and hard-working student. When he was 18, he became Hong Kong's cha-cha-cha dance champion. Also, when he was 18, he fought someone who was connected to the underground crime scene in Hong Kong. Because of this, there was a hit placed on Bruce, which forced his parents to send him to the United States. At 18, he studied philosophy at the University of Washington in Seattle, and it was during this time he began teaching martial arts, opening up the Junfang Kung Fu Institute. He met his wife Linda through university, and she was a student in his Kung Fu class. Bruce and his wife Linda moved to Oakland, California, where he opened his second school. His third school he opened in Los Angeles, California. In 1964, Bruce was challenged by some Kung Fu men from San Francisco who objected to his teaching of non-Chinese students. Bruce accepted the challenge, which consisted of a fight where the terms were if Bruce was defeated, he would have to stop teaching anyone that wasn't Chinese. It was a short fight, which mostly consisted of him having to chase his opponent, who was running from him, Once Bruce caught him and pinned him to the floor, he asked the opponent if he gives up, and the opponent said he gives up. Even though he had won, he was winded and discouraged about his inability to put the man away in under 3 minutes. This marked a turning point for Bruce in his exploration of his physical fitness and started the evolution of Jeet Kune Do, which at its core means using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation. Just as Bruce was cementing his plans to expand his martial arts schools, fate stepped in to move his life in another direction. In 1964, Bruce was invited to give a demonstration in Long Beach, California at his first international karate tournament. That's where you see the footage of him doing the 2-finger push-ups and the 1-inch punch and the 6-inch punch. After this demonstration, Hollywood took notice of him. In 1965, he had a son, Brandon Lee. Bruce encountered resistance while working in Hollywood, so he headed off to Hong Kong, where he made 3 films, which consecutively broke all box office records and showcased martial arts in an entirely new way. Hollywood took notice again, and soon Bruce was making the first Hollywood-Hong Kong co-production with a film called Enter the Dragon. The years between 1967 and 1971, Bruce taught private lessons in Jeet Kune Do, often to people in the entertainment industry, like Steve McQueen, James Coburn, Sterling Silliphant, Cy Weintraub, Ted Ashley, Joe Hyams, James Gardner, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and many others. One more blessing, he had a daughter in 1969, Shannon Lee. The film that sent him to international fame, Enter the Dragon, unfortunately he would not live to see the opening of his film that was to premiere in August 1973. On July 20th, 1973, Bruce Lee passed away at just 32 years old. That is the age I am. On this day, while he was in Hong Kong, it is assumed that he had a minor headache and was offered a Chinese prescription Advil-type painkiller, and that he must have had a hypersensitivity to an ingredient in the pain medication. Obviously, this left a lot of people wondering what really went down. I believe that unless you've been to the actual source, one may never know the truth behind an event unless you have actually been there. The world lost a brilliant talent and an evolved human being that day. His spirit remains an inspiration to untold numbers of people around the world. Okay, Bruce Lee's astrology is pretty cool, to say the least. His sun and rising sign, or ascendant sign, are both in Sagittarius, which is the sign of the philosopher. And his daughter believes that he was one of the greatest philosophers of the 20th century. And you know what? I happen to agree with her. His moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars were all in Scorpio, which is the planet of regeneration and just awesome willpower. His midheaven was in perfectionist Virgo. I also find it interesting that in his Chinese astrology, in his chart, it's really cool and kind of destined for awesomeness, to be in success, to be born the year and the hour of the dragon. But he has, I never seen a chart where they have all 5 elements in their animal chart. He was the year of the metal dragon, hour of the earth dragon, day of the wood dog, month of the fire pig, and minute of the water ox. So he had all 5 elements, which could create, it's a nice balance of elements for sure, energy. I've always thought that, Bruce Lee was a badass martial artist, movie star. And I've always really liked his intelligent quotes that I've seen from him. But I just recently really started researching into who he really was, what he was really all about. Kind of in a sort of attempt to help, to inspire my estranged boyfriend in hopes that he would want to learn about this legend that his father named him after. That didn't really happen, or not yet, but through trying to inspire my estranged boyfriend, I found inspiration in Bruce Lee's teachings. So let me read a little bit more about this book. I didn't read this yet, did I? Be Water, My Friend, The Teachings of Bruce Lee by Shannon Lee. Bruce Lee's daughter illuminates her father's most powerful life philosophies, demonstrating how martial arts are a perfect metaphor for personal growth and how we can practice these teachings every day. Empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. You put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. You put water into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. You put it into a bottle, it becomes the bottle. Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend. My father was a truly phenomenal specimen of a human being in many ways. Intelligent, creative, learned, skilled, driven. He worked really hard to cultivate every aspect of himself. At one point he said, "Some may not believe it, but I spent hours perfecting whatever I did." He worked not only at sculpting his body, but at shaping his mind, educating himself, evolving his practices, developing his potential. He also worked at the little things, like having beautiful handwriting, writing and speaking grammatically well, developing a colloquial understanding of English through joke-telling, learning how to direct a film. The list goes on and on. And as a result, he created a legacy that continues to be relevant 47 years after his death. Martial arts was my father's chosen love. From the age of 13, when he started practicing Wing Chun, until the end of his life at age 32, he practiced every single day with little exception. He said of his passion for martial arts, "Everything I have learned through the practice of martial arts." He had an extraordinarily sharp and insightful mind, and I often think it was a brilliant piece of fate that a mind like his was attached to such a physical and combative practice. As it turns out, martial arts is a perfect metaphor for life. There are few disciplines where the stakes are so personal and so high as in a fight. Proficiency in martial arts is the practice of keeping centered and skillfully responsive under the most direst of circumstances. The threat of physical harm. When you have mastery in combat, you not only meet a fight with composure and skill, you become an artist of movement, expressing yourself powerfully in the immediate unfolding present with absolute freedom and certainty. When your personal safety or very life is on the line, to remain alert, mobile, and skillful is an immense feat of self-mastery. A boy, a kung fu master, and a boat. My father began studying Wing Chun Kung Fu in Hong Kong at the age of 13. His sifu, or teacher, was a man by the name of Yip Man. Yip Man was a very skillful teacher who not only drilled physical techniques, but also wove in Taoist philosophy and the principles of yin and yang into his lessons. He often illustrated his teachings through parables on nature, such as using the difference between an oak tree and bamboo to make a point. The oak tree will eventually snap under a strong wind, while bamboo survives because it can move with the wind. My father was a dedicated student and a quick learner. He practiced outside of class whenever he could and became a star pupil. But he was also a teenager whose childhood nickname had been Mu Si Ting, which translates to never sit still, and whose later nickname and stage name was Su Long, or Little Dragon. Born in the hour of the dragon and the year of the dragon, young Bruce Lee was all fire, all yang, and Yip Man was forever trying to teach this fiery teen the importance of gentleness, fluidity, and pliability, not just strength and cunning. To my father's credit, he would listen and try, but his eagerness and his temper would get the better of him, and besides, he'd wonder, isn't it better to win however you can? What does gentleness have to do with winning, really? Be whole. Yin-yang was very important to my father. He used yin-yang in the symbol he created for his martial art. He was very well versed in the philosophy of yin-yang. Whole books, movements, and schools have grown up around the understanding and embodiment of yin-yang, and we will talk more about it as we go, but for now, let's start with a basic understanding of the symbol as a representation for wholeness. In the Western world, we tend to consider yin and yang as opposites, hot and cold, young and old, tall and short. But in the Eastern world, yin-yang, notice how I removed the and, separating the two, are considered complements of one another, not opposites. In fact, they work together to represent the whole of experience. If you think about it, hot and cold are merely the extreme ends of the whole experience of temperature. Without hot, there is no cold, and vice versa. And further, without both, there is not the moderate pleasantness of warmth or coolness. And so it is with water. Water is gentle yet powerful, soft yet strong, flowing yet deep. And so it is with life. Life can be joyful and sad, beautiful and ugly, exciting and terrifying, and yet these are the extremes of the whole experience. If we resist one half of the experience, we may never reach the heights of its rewards or the contentment of its balance. But when we strike a balance within the interplay of these extremes, we find peace and harmony, we find ease. Meditation as a tool. It may come as no surprise that my father meditated, starting as a teenager and continuing throughout the rest of his life in one form or another. Meditation is a great tool for creating that calm space in the mind that is needed to gain perspective and to empty your cup. He often liked to untether his mind and let it float, while he was moving. Surprise, surprise. He used his morning jog as a meditative time. He sometimes would also walk around our backyard while simultaneously meditating. It's not about how you do it, whether your eyes are open or closed, whether you are sitting or moving. It's about that space of mental calm. It's about the untethering and making room for new perceptions, and figuring out how that works for you is another step toward understanding yourself and how your cup best empties. While Bruce Lee's life provides us with an impressive example, remember that we are focusing on you here and the course and direction of your life. His life story is complete in the form of Bruce Lee. Yours is ongoing, and Bruce can be an amazing pointer of the way. In fact, he himself said, "Remember, I am no teacher. I can merely be a signpost for a traveler who is lost. It is up to you to decide on the direction. All I can offer is an experience but never a conclusion, so even what I have said needs to be thoroughly examined by you. I might be able to help you to discover and examine your problem by awakening your awareness. A teacher, a good teacher that is, functions as a pointer to truth, but not a giver of truth. For it is easy to criticize and break down the spirit of others, but to know yourself takes maybe a lifetime. To take responsibility of one's actions, good and bad, is something else. After all knowledge simply means self-knowledge." My father noted that many of his friends and family were surprised that he was studying philosophy, since all he had ever been fanatical about was martial arts. They assumed he would go into some sort of physical education once in college. But my father quickly saw the connection between philosophy and martial arts. Recall that he wrote, "Every action should have its why and wherefore. I wish to infuse the spirit of philosophy into martial arts. Therefore, I insisted upon studying philosophy." The literal translation of Gung Fu is skill achieved through hard work and discipline. One mantra of his was, "Be a practical dreamer backed by action." No matter what, you must let your inner light guide you out of the darkness. Do you know how I like to think of myself? As a human being, because under the sky, under the heavens, there is but one family. I don't know what is the meaning of death, but I am not afraid to die. And I go on, non-stop, going forward, even though I, Bruce Lee, may die someday without fulfilling all of my ambitions. I will have no regrets. I did what I wanted to do, and what I've done with sincerity and to the best of my ability. You can't expect much more from life. Epilogue. I have to leave you now, my friend. You have a long journey ahead of you, and you must travel light. These paragraphs at best have been merely a finger pointing at the moon. Please do not take the finger to be the moon, or fix your intense gaze on the finger and thus miss all the beautiful sight of heaven. After all, the usefulness of the finger is in pointing away from itself to the light that illuminates finger and all. From now on, drop all your burden and of preconceived conclusions behind, and open yourself to everything and everyone ahead. Remember, my friend, the usefulness of the cup is in its emptiness. Bruce Lee. I would like to mention one way to keep his legacy alive is by visiting the Bruce Lee official store online. I got this cute crop top. It's a picture of his driver's license and his very handsome face. Water bottle says simplicity is the key, and the Junfang Gung Fu Institute. I got these really cool foam nunchucks from there as well. I'm just a beginner, but I'm really excited to learn self-defense and get into these nunchakus. And I also bought her book from there as well. I wanted to end this video with a quote from Lee Little Dragon. Do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one.